Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes from Ahoy or No. What does the loss of Roy Moore tell you about 2018? I'm conflicted because not electing a pedophile is such an incredibly low bar, it shouldn't even be news. No congratulations from me. Also, did you hear how Belgium did not elect a known pedophile in 2016? It wasn't big news here either. The loss of Roy Moore tells me this about 2018, that the fight ahead is going to be a stiff one. Because even though Roy Moore was defeated, he only lost by a few percentage points, and there were hundreds of thousands of people who came out on Election Day in Alabama to vote for Roy Moore, the multiple times accused pedophile or creeper of teenagers, or whatever you want to characterize him as. But it also tells me that we can win, but we have to show up to fight. We can't just sit back and go, oh, they nominated a pedophile, well, that'll just take care of itself. No, it won't. We thought that last year with Trump. A lot of us did. You know, a lot of progressive, more left-leaning people either didn't show up to vote or voted for someone other than Hillary Clinton in the election because they figured, well, Trump, that's a self-solving problem. Nobody's going to vote for Trump, and here we are. So yeah, you're right. It's nothing to be congratulating ourselves about. The only reason people are so happy that Roy Moore lost was that the specter of Roy Moore winning was so unthinkable, was so incredibly destructive and horrifying that the fact that we avoided it was something to party about. But what we should really be focusing on is the fact that a man like Roy Moore got that far, that his party continued to support him throughout all of those things, that he was nominated to begin with. Because even before we knew about Roy Moore's sexual indiscretions, he was a horrible candidate. He should have been an unacceptable candidate from the beginning, but he wasn't. He was embraced and he was supported by his party and by the voters. So it's going to be a stiff fight in 2018. It's a fight we can win, as the Alabama special election shows, but it proves also that it's going to be tough. We're going to have to show up and we're going to have to scrap for it. It's going to be interesting. Mystic mind analysis. Are there ever times where violent revolution is necessary, given the normalization of white nationalism among the mainstream right-wing parties, as well as the legacy of right-wing parties dominating media and trying to suppress voters to control opposition? At what point do we say enough is enough and take a stand to ensure that everyone gets their basic needs of life met? Well, I don't want to say that there are never times when a violent revolution is warranted, but I also don't want to say that we are at that moment now, or take it upon myself to decide for everyone else when that moment is. I will say that the need for violent revolution in the minds of many people would be less urgent. That tactic would be less appealing if we had a more competent center-left or left-wing party in this country. The real reason, I think, why in the minds of a lot of people who are disillusioned and even more than that, threatened by the ascendance of Republicans and right-wing politicians, the reason why so many of those folks look at the prospect of taking to the streets, even in violence, as such an appealing alternative, is that they have no faith in the other side of that political spectrum. Because as much as I will go down defending the Democrats as being different than the Republicans and as being preferable to the Republicans and as being the party where more of our focus and attention and support should be focused, the sad fact is that the Democratic Party as it exists today could fuck up a wet dream. So I think that's an element of this, an aspect of this that needs to be put out there as well. It's not just the ascendance of the right wing. It's also the fact that the Democrats, which are the closest to a left-wing party that we have at the moment, are so unreliable and are such a bunch of useless fuck-ups. If they were more competent, then I think the urge to revolution would not be quite as pronounced for a lot of people. Andrea L.S. I live a bit of a dual life online, where I feel free to speak my mind on YouTube, but my past attempts to do so on Twitter have backfired quite severely, getting doxing threats and had a different account compromised. I like keeping engaged in part of the discussion, but I had to completely delete and remake my Twitter, now strictly dealing with hobbies of mine, as well as unfollow family to protect them. It feels rough having to only read posts and not say anything, so I'm considering changing my approach. How do you approach your online presence? I know that you tend to stay involved with social and activist related posts and such, but how do you find that balance of serious and play? How do you deal with threats? On Twitter, as on YouTube, when I'm posting things of my own, I don't really take into account any sort of backlash that it might trigger. I don't care about that. I say what's on my mind. I say what I think I need to say, or what I find interesting at the moment, or what I'm feeling at the moment. And if it's something that could be used as a point of attack against me by people who hate me, that's just something that I accept. I don't tailor my output on social media to avoid people coming for me, because I know they're going to anyway. People who hate me are going to attack me no matter what I say. So I just don't care. I don't allow them to dictate what I do. And when it comes to interacting with people, for people who I consider who interact with me in a threatening way or a hostile way or an insulting way, I just don't give them anything. I block them, I mute them, I don't respond to them, I don't play with them at all. And if they do something that is abusive, that I think is in violation of the rules or the guidelines of the platform, then I report them. And I let Twitter handle it, and hopefully Twitter sanctions them. They suspends them or forces them to delete the tweet or bans their account or whatever. I handle it that way. If I see people being abusive, if I see people whether they're harassing me or they're harassing someone else, I report them. And I let Twitter handle it. Now, Twitter isn't great at handling it, but it's slowly getting a little better at it, as are the other social media platforms. There are still huge problems with how Twitter, Facebook, YouTube handle harassment and abuse, and people co-opting their platforms to spread intolerance and bigotry and ignorance. There are still massive problems with those platforms, but they're slowly getting a little bit better here and there. And they've introduced a few tools in the last couple of years that make it a little easier to deal with if you, like me, are the target of a lot of withering abuse and harassment and trolling. One thing that Twitter has done in the last year or so is given everybody the option to set notifications where you only get notifications from people you follow. So if you are being dogpiled, you don't necessarily have to go in and mute everybody or block everybody to short circuit the dogpile. You can just switch your notifications to only notify me of tweets that mention me from people that I follow. So you don't get that blown up, 99 plus notifications that a lot of people, they see that and they just kind of freeze up and it becomes a source of anxiety. Then that helps. That helps a lot and frees up a lot of time. So you're not on Twitter. Twitter is usable again. You're not just on it deleting people or blocking people or going through shitty comments that people send you. You can actually use it for what you intended to use it for in the first place, which is nice. But yeah, if people threaten me or if they do anything abusive or that I feel is over the line or is hate speech or is harassing or anything like that, then I report them. I don't talk to them at all. I don't engage with them at all. Engagement is what they want. They want to get some kind of response from me, and I give them no personal response. My response is to click the report button. Tendai Mano Mano. Been a long time, Steve. How do you feel about Disney buying Fox? We might finally get a movie that does Dr. Doom. Lightning crackles in the background. Justice. See, I am very torn on the Disney Fox buyout. The teenager who still lives inside of me, who remembers discovering the original Jack Kirby, Stan Lee Fantastic Four comics through black and white reprints in the 90s, is excited about it because I love the Fantastic Four and I love specifically the original Fantastic Four, the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby Fantastic Four. And I would very dearly love to see a movie that captures that spirit and does those characters justice, which has not been made yet. So the prospect of a really great Fantastic Four movie, not just a good Doctor Doom, but just to do justice to all of those characters, is very appealing to me. And the comic book nerd in me thinking about, oh, now the Marvel Universe can be whole. Now the X-Men and the Avengers can be under the same roof, just like the comics. That feels right to me. That feels good to me. I think that's a positive thing. But the consolidation of media under fewer and fewer roofs is troubling. The fact that Disney owns, or soon will own, so much of our popular culture is worrying. I mean, Disney has done a good job so far. They've been a good steward of these properties over the years. When they bought the Muppets, we were all worried, oh, they're going to ruin the Muppets. The Muppets have done okay. We were worried that they were going to ruin Marvel. Marvel's done okay. Marvel's actually prospered and done great, especially in the movies. And I assume creatively that the new properties that they gained from the Fox buyout will do very good as well, because they know what they're doing. Disney has been a good steward. But you still have that unavoidable problem of, yeah, but should one company have this much control over so much of our media, over so much of our entertainment industry? I don't think that's a good thing. There's no reason why Disney has to own everything for stuff to be good. I mean, with the Marvel characters, it makes sense because X-Men and Fantastic Four and the other characters that they'll gain through the Fox buyout, they belong with Marvel anyway, so that's not a big deal. It goes beyond that. But when Disney owns Marvel and the Muppets and Star Wars and all of the Disney properties that it had already, and when it's going out and now it's going to have a controlling stake in Hulu, and it's going to own all these other the Fox network and all of these other areas of the entertainment industry, it's all going to be under the ever-growing shadow of the Disney umbrella. And that I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think this conglomeration and condensing of the media under fewer and fewer umbrellas of ownership is a good thing. So the comic book nerd in me is like, yes, bring the MCU together again. Keep making awesome Star Wars movies. Go Disney. But there's another part of me that's like, yeah, but in the long run, this trend is a very, very dangerous and worrying thing. Joshua Bolding. Hi, Steve. I'm a longtime viewer, and this is the first, and since you're canceling this, probably last question I'm asking. I've been thinking about something and wanted to know what your thoughts are on it. Is it possible that Donald Trump winning might have been good for America? I myself voted for Hillary. I would have liked Bernie Sanders to win personally. I've been thinking that even if Hillary or Bernie won, they would have had to deal with a Congress controlled by Republicans, and apart from executive orders, wouldn't be able to get much legislation passed. Also, every little problem would be blamed on them, and I believe most people would excuse the Republican Congress. Now that Republicans control all branches of the government, and we've seen how atrocious everything has become, people seem to be realizing that they do not care at all about the people, and Trump is not going to make America great again. There is no one now who can be blamed for America's problems except them, unless you're Alex Jones. I get the feeling that there is a change for the better happening in America from the bottom up, and I think Donald Trump becoming president seems to be what has gotten people more civically active. It certainly has that effect on me. Maybe his presidency will serve as a painful but much needed lesson for us. Hopefully people learn from the lesson. First of all, don't necessarily make this your last question. Just because I'm ending You Had to Ask doesn't mean you won't be able to ask me questions anymore. As I mentioned when I announced the end of this series, I am going to be doing regular live streams dedicated to answering questions. And if you can't be there for the live stream to ask a question in the chat while I'm streaming, you can submit questions ahead of time, just like you do for this show. And I will answer pre-submitted questions during that live stream as well. So please keep watching. Watch the live streams. They will be archived, of course. You'll be able to watch them after they've been streamed and catch up on them if you can't watch them live. And please do continue asking questions, even if you can't make it to the live stream live, because I will still be answering questions from comments and other sources. So I just wanted to put that out there. Anybody who's like, oh no, he's ending the show, I won't be able to ask any more questions. Yes, you can totally keep asking questions the same way you ask them now. I'll just answer them in the live stream instead of a pre-recorded video like this. Now, is Trump winning a good thing in the long run? I mean, since it has happened, since we are in that reality, I hope that that's how it turns out to be. And Trump himself is such a craven, shameless egomaniac that if his election does provoke a resurgence of progressive politics and wake people up to how serious the threat of letting right-wingers run everything is, and Trump lives to see that, I'm sure he will take credit for it. He will say, yes, I look at what I inspired in the American people. That's what he'll say, because that's just the kind of douchebag that he is. The whole world revolves around him. And even if his fuck-ups and failures lead to good things, he'll take credit for that too. It's a shame that we need a lesson like this. I do think that it will lead to good things in the long run. I do hope and perhaps naively, overly optimistically expect that there will be good things to come from this, that more people are getting involved in politics at the grassroots level. More people are running for office, not just for Congress or the Senate, but for their local elections, for their state legislatures, and that's a good thing. People who are center of left and toward the left are becoming more involved in politics, are now seeing the urgent need for people to be involved in the process, to get out and vote, to remain in contact with their representatives, to donate when they're able to volunteer, to give people rides to the polls, to do all of these things that maybe they weren't doing before. Now you see what happens. Now you see what can really happen if you don't show up, if you're able to show up and participate in this process. Now you see the consequences. Now you see how bad it can get. So yes, I do think it will be a good thing. And I do think a lot of us will learn this lesson. The problem is eventually we will forget. And in another 30 or 40 years, we will have to go through this all over again. Now, it may not be as bad as Trump. 40 years ago, it was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was not as bad as Donald Trump. Ronald Reagan was still bad. And Ronald Reagan still inspired a generation of Democrats and of leftists to get involved and to say, okay, we can't let this happen again. And after Reagan and Bush, we had a pretty good run where things were not as bad. And then it circles back around again, where the Republican Party once again falls under the control of the extremists of the far right, and we get Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump is the worst example I can think of that cycle, but the cycle will probably continue. So we will learn our lesson for a while. We'll control things again. We'll win some more elections. We'll get some more progressive policies passed. More progress will be made. The arc of justice will be bent a little bit more, or the arc of history will be bent a little bit more toward justice. But then it will repeat itself, because that is the sad nature of our existence. We learn and then we forget. Captain Andy, speaking as a fan of the Star Wars prequels, do you think one of the main problems people have with them is that they watched the original trilogy as kids and have since grown up and subconsciously have expected the franchise to grow up with them, when in reality it has stayed as what it originally was, fairly straightforward action-adventure with fairly straightforward, uncomplicated characters? I've noticed a lot of more modern space adventure shows such as Firefly, Dark Matter, the new Battlestar Galactica, etc., have been a lot grittier and more dramatic, and perhaps Star Wars seems like a bit of a dinosaur by comparison. You're right that Star Wars, at least the mainline Star Wars films, is probably never going to be that gritty, adult, self-serious, dramatic form of sci-fi like the reboot of Battlestar Galactica was. That's just not what Star Wars is, and it probably is never going to be that, at least not in its main form. But I don't think that really hurts it. I think that's part of the appeal of Star Wars. That's why it will continue to endure, because that's what people come to it for. If people want gritty, more realistic, more dramatic forms of science fiction, there are those shows and movies out there that they can go to, but they can always come back to Star Wars if they also like a freewheeling, fun, pulpy space adventure. The brilliant stroke of The Last Jedi that I found was that it was that pulpy space adventure that Star Wars at its best has always been, but it also added layers of complexity thematically and in terms of character that Star Wars has often not attempted. So I think The Last Jedi is a great template for going forward, where you can still have the rip-roaring, crowd-pleasing adventure movie, but you can also have some more serious things going on just under the surface as well. That's what I thought was so cool about it. But yeah, I think not having something not meet your expectations is probably a factor. When you don't like anything. If you see a Star Wars movie and it's not what you imagined it would be, there's a lot of us that would probably react very poorly to that. Especially if we aren't terribly open to having our expectations defied. Hopefully I remember to put the bell sound effect in this week and I don't look like I'm hallucinating when I do this. But anyway, you know what the bell means?
The lightning round.
Skull Bearer. Do you watch the Young Turks? What do you think of them? Do you think their focus on getting money out of politics is the right way to go to fix the American government? I don't watch them regularly. I catch an odd video of theirs now and then if it pops up in my feed and if it looks interesting, but I'm not like a dedicated viewer. And I think getting money out of politics is one right way to go. I don't think there is the right way. There are many different things we should be doing to improve the government and improve our society in general, and getting money out of politics is one of those things. So I support them in that. I don't think it's the right way, but it's one right way. It is something we should be working on. Der Wunderbar Bar, what YouTube channels regarding movies do you watch? I watch Looper and Cinefix a lot. And recently I have started to watch Minty Productions as well, since he talks about movies that have become cult classics like Labyrinth and Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I catch bad lip reading when a new one of those comes out. I watch Red Letter Media here and there, not as much as I used to, but I still catch it whenever I see it if I have time. I love Lindsay Ellis. I think she's great. I love Folding Ideas with Dan Olson. I think he's fantastic. Those are some of the ones that I watch regularly, Sabrina Lozides Meredith, last holiday question for you, Steve. What's your favorite religious Christmas song? And what's your favorite non-religious Christmas song? Favorite religious Christmas song is Oh Holy Night. Favorite non-religious Christmas song is Happy Christmas, War is Over by John Lennon. Corey Donaldson, why is it whenever a female actor stands up for herself and not take any garbage from her fellow male actors, she's considered a bitch while getting attacked online, but if a male actor stands up for himself, he gets praised? I don't think that is very fair, do you? No, I think that's one of the softer versions of the same phenomena that we see in the sexual harassment epidemic, the pervasive sexual harassment that is in Hollywood that we have been reminded of over the last few months since the Harvey Weinstein allegations resurfaced. That women are they're subjected to a lot of sexism and a lot of misogyny and a lot of very demeaning, dismissive treatment. And it doesn't always come out in the form of harassment or assault. Sometimes it comes out in the way people talk about you and look at you and perceive you. Yeah, a man who stands up for himself is considered someone who has confidence, and he doesn't take any shit, and he stands up for what he's entitled to, and that's an admirable trait. He's strong. A woman who does that is a troublemaker. She's difficult to work with. She's a bitch. She's bossy. She's entitled. Yeah, it's all of a piece with the sexual harassment and everything else that women have to deal with. It's sexism and being looked down on by men who view them a certain way because of these prejudicial ideas that we have about women that are instilled in many of us, and most of us, by our culture in ways that we aren't even aware of. Yeah, absolutely. Malevolent Divinity, are you going to call the new weird live stream thing in honor of the lightning round the Thunderstorm? No. Actually, at the moment, the title for the live streams will be Ask Away. But I'm open to suggestions for other titles for the live stream replacement for this show. Blood Toker, hey Steve, what's your daytime job? YouTube personality. You're looking at my daytime job, my friend. Dr. Babylon, Steve, men's rights activists from our world are transported to a dimension where gender roles are flipped. The size and strength of men relative to women is reversed. Society is matriarchal, and feminism is a reactionary backlash against men's rights, put into a world that needs them. How effective would men's rights activists be at social justice activism? They would be completely ineffectual, just like they are in our world. One of the silver linings to men's rights activists is that they are complete fuck-ups. And they are utterly self-defeating and useless. So even though their viewpoints are vile and they are good at making life miserable for people who they target with their harassment and their abuse and the toxic ideas that they propagate, when it comes to having a real talent and interest in activism and pushing social change, they're completely useless. So they would probably still be that way in the alternate universe as well. But hopefully the men in that universe would have their equivalent of a legitimate feminist movement, like in our universe, to push for their rights and to fight back against gender inequality. And just like men in our universe, they wouldn't need the men's rights activists. The men's rights activists could go ahead and whinge and do the things that they always do, and the actual legitimate activists and social workers and drivers of change would do the real work that needs to be done. So it except for the gender reversal, it wouldn't be that different from our own universe. How about that? Hey, that's the last question. It's time now for the shout out, and the shout out this week goes to a fellow YouTuber of mine who I discovered this year, and I think she's fantastic. And if you haven't been watching her stuff, I think you will think she is fantastic too. The shout out goes to Guinevere, aka Gwen No Fear. Get it? She has an awesome YouTube channel. She does a lot of gaming videos, which aren't really my cup of tea, but she also does essays or vlogs about politics and social justice and stuff like that. And she talks about movies and TV shows and other forms of entertainment. She's really sharp, really smart, great, awesome, progressive voice with a lot of interesting ideas and a lot of interesting things to say. And she's just a really, really cool person. And I think she's awesome. And I think you'll think she's awesome too. So that's the shout out. Gwen No Fear. Check her out. I also want to remind everyone that tickets are on sale now for the Atheist Conference, TAC, coming to New York City, the Roosevelt Hotel next year, July 6th, 7th, and 8th. You can get your tickets and make your hotel reservations at theatheistconference.com. I will be there. Christy Winters will be there. Mandisa Thomas will be there giving the keynote speech. Foxy Jezebel, ContraPoints, The One Janitor, Aaron Ra. It's going to be an awesome, awesome event. More speakers to be added as we get closer and closer to the date, but don't wait. Get your tickets and make your hotel reservations now. Plan to join us in New York City, July 6th, 7th, and 8th, 2018 for the Atheist Conference, the first conference of its kind in New York City. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait, and I can't wait to hopefully meet a lot of you there. I also want to remind you, as always, to check out the Lemme Listen family of podcasts. These are podcasts that are created by my good buddy Jason Harding, and I particularly want to draw your attention to the Late Seating podcast. It's the belated movie review podcast co-hosted by Jason and me, where we take a fresh look at a classic film, a film that has a reputation of either being really good or really terrible, and we decide for ourselves what we think of it, and along the way we summarize it and we make fun of it, and it's just a lot of fun for everybody. If you go to the website now, you can listen to our most recent episode of Late Seating, which is actually a commentary track for Home Alone, and it's up today. It's a brand new episode. You watch your copy of Home Alone and you play our commentary track along with it, and you get to hear us make fun of Home Alone and offer our keen critical insight as you watch the film yourself. It's amazing. It's fantastic. It's the kind of thing that Riff Tracks does. It's basically a riff track. It's an off-brand riff track for Home Alone, starring Jason and myself. So check that out. It's an awesome episode. It was a lot of fun to do, even though we had to watch Home Alone to do it. It was still worth it. And you can listen to all of our past episodes and all of the other episodes of all of the wonderful Lemme Listen podcasts by going to LemmeListenPodcast.com. Now, that is it for me, everybody, for the penultimate episode of You Had to Ask. I will be back next week for one final episode of You Had to Ask, and then, like a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis in a few weeks in the new year, You Had to Ask will emerge and it will be transformed. Instead of this, it will be a live stream where I will answer questions from the chat, and I will also answer questions from comments and stuff like that. I'll still do this kind of stuff, but I'll also be interacting with people live in the chat, and it'll be very exciting and very fun, and I can't wait for that. But before that happens, we have one more of these to go. So please leave a comment on this video and ask me your question for next time for the final episode of You Had to Ask. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next and final episode of You Had to Ask. So please do get those questions in. Thanks for watching as always, everybody. See you next time. Take care. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. See you next time.